Good afternoon. My name is Crystal Dahl, and I am the Online Communications Specialist here at Meritas. I would like to welcome and thank each of you for joining us on today's capability webinar, Recent Trends in Succession and Estate Planning. I have the pleasure of introducing today's speakers. Ron is a partner of Brazo Seller, the Ottawa, Canada Meritas affiliate, and president of the firm's affiliated succession planning company, Equitas Consultants Incorporated. Ron is a lawyer and succession planning consultant. His main area of focus is the transition of family businesses from one generation to the next through facilitated family discussions and the implementation of appropriate governance structures for the business and the family. While working with the client's estate planning professionals, he helps quarterback the succession and estate planning process to make it as seamless as possible to the client. Welcome, Ron. We also have with us today Dr. Balka. Dr. Balka, an author of over 30 books, hundreds of magazine and newspaper articles, as well as a host of radio and television shows. Psychologist Dr. Balka has counseled families and family businesses for over 35 years and is widely admired for his deeply human, down-to-earth, and compassionate style. Dr. Balka helps identify and bring clarity to underlying family issues that may be distracted from addressing important family business issues. His unique grasp of family business dynamics and relationships allow him to help all stakeholders gain an ability to understand and separate those issues that need to be addressed as individuals from those that need to be addressed by the family business. His focus is assisting with family business issues. Welcome, Dr. Balka.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. All phone lines will be muted. If you have a question, please use the chat feature found on the left-hand side of your screen. Questions will be held until the end and then answered at the end of the presentation. Also, in the next few days, I will distribute to each of you a copy of the presentation and a recording of the webinar. With that, Ron, are you ready to get started?
I certainly am, Crystal. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever it happens to be where you are. We have an excellent turnout, so thank you for joining us. We are excited to be sharing our perspectives on succession and estate planning, and as the title suggests, we're going to focus on some of the recent trends that we have experienced, and we would certainly invite you with your questions or comments to share yours with us. So before we start, I'd like to talk about the difference between succession planning and estate planning. Just a quick definitional item. Because sometimes people have different ideas of these terms. So succession planning is the planning of the succession of a business. Often what we do would be from one generation to the next, although it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And when I think of succession planning, I think of it in two very broad categories. One is management succession planning, and the other is ownership succession planning. Management, of course, the transition of leadership from the current leader to another leader, and ownership succession planning is the transfer. I think something that perhaps all of you on this call would be very familiar with is the transition of ownership, and often, again, from one generation to the next, although not necessarily so. Estate planning, on the other hand, is more of a technical term that we use to provide for the transfer of wealth, typically in a will, and other documents that, again, you would all be familiar with. So with that, let's look at the agenda for our time together this afternoon. So first we'll talk about the traditional estate planning model, and from there we will look at the problem with that model, in that it often, in our view, does not address what seems to matter most to the clients that we deal with. The third thing we will look at is what gets in the way, what are the barriers to addressing those issues that do matter most to our clients. Fourthly, we will look at successful succession plans, and in effect what we're talking about there is how to overcome those barriers that we identify in the third item. And then we will get into recent trends, and lastly give all of you an opportunity to participate in the discussion. So the traditional estate planning model. We're going to assume here that we are dealing with the owner of a business who may have one or more family members involved in the business. So over time, hopefully, our dear client has built up a successful business, has accumulated wealth, and that wealth can be accumulated not just through the business, but also through other investments such as real estate or other investment assets. So there comes a point in time, often when our clients are in their 50s or 60s, fairly typically, is that there would be a conversation that we would have with that client to say, you have accumulated this wealth. If something were to happen to you, if you were to pass away suddenly, do you know how much tax would have to be paid on your death? And that then leads to discussions, again, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, about reducing or deferring taxes on death. And there are various structures that are used. Oftentimes there is an estate freeze where the business owner converts his or her common shares of the company into preferred shares at a fixed value at the time of the transaction, with common shares being issued, again, often to a trust for the benefit of family members, often children, going forward. And of course, the idea of freezing the value is that upon death, it's those frozen value preferred shares that are owned by the person who has passed, and taxes paid on that, as opposed to what would otherwise be, assuming that it's a growing business, a much larger amount later on. And so the result, taxes are minimized at that time and deferred to a later time. So there is a problem with this traditional model, and essentially the problem is that it does not address what is often the most important issue to the client. Issues such as who will take over my business after I retire? Are my children really interested, or are they just telling me what I want to hear? If they are interested, how do they get properly trained so they will be in a position to take over at the appropriate time? If I anoint child number one, how will that affect child number two, who may have been expecting to be anointed? And how would that affect their relationship? Questions like this are very common. And the traditional model of looking at reducing taxes in and of itself does not address it. It's not to suggest, by the way, that in the course of that exercise, conversations do not take place. Of course they do, between the lawyer and the client. It's that often those discussions are of a light nature, and oftentimes and usually no one else is involved. The business owner there may be the spouse of the business owner, but it's certainly rare in the traditional model that any children or other key stakeholders of the business would be involved. So this little pie chart that you have in front of you is taken from a significant study that was done over 10 years ago, and it's all reflected in a book by Williams and Presser called Preparing Heirs, and it surveyed 3,250 families, so this is not a small sample size by any means. And what they discovered, the first thing they shared, which was not really news to any of us in the field, is that 70% of all transitions of business from one generation to the next typically fail. And it's not just a business, think of it as a wealth transition. So what they were interested in this book was trying to ascertain, well, if there's this much failure, what are the reasons for the failure? And the single largest reason for the failure was a breakdown in trust and communications. A clear 60% of these 3,250 families cited a breakdown in trust and communications as the single largest reason for the failure. The second largest reason, at 25%, was a failure to prepare the next generation. That, as I'm sure perhaps all of you have experienced yourselves, it's one thing to say, this is what I would like to do with my business. It's another thing for that to actually happen, and oftentimes it's because, for whatever reason, the next generation is not prepared to take over. What was really interesting to me in this is the last one, 15% all other causes, and this is where sort of the light bulb went off for me some years ago. Included in all other causes would be failure of the legal structures that were set up. Perhaps there was a tax structure that went awry. There wasn't a mission statement, so a failure to define mission. So all within the 15% was this tax item, which I always understood to be the main reason why people went to see lawyers and accountants at that time. That was certainly what I had observed and was in fact happening out there. So you see the issue here is that what our industry has been trying to do is wonderful. It's a beautiful thing to help people save and defer taxes. The problem is that this was not anywhere near the number one reason for these failures. So, what gets in the way? We'll hand that over to Dr. Bulka.
Thank you, Ron, very much. What gets in the way? Let's preface this by saying that we would assume in almost all instances that the people entering into this, especially the older generation wanting to make way for the younger, are doing it with the best of intentions. But unfortunately, sometimes you can have the best of intentions that doesn't always translate into the best of results. And that is because there are certain currents that are going on inside the individual that they may not even be aware of, that stand in the way of them making a good connect with their children. The one that obviously is the most salient is when the relationship was testy or not on solid ground to begin with. But sometimes even that is not a guarantee. In other words, even if the relationship is good, it's not a guarantee that the relationship is going to result in a success. So here are some of the small little elephants that are in the room that could get in the way. It's no comprehensive list, but these are probably the major ones. One of them, it's a subconscious one, which is that the person wanting to make way for the next generation probably owes a lot of his or her success to having done it their way. And now all of a sudden, their way may not be what the next generation really is comfortable with. And this is a little bit of a barrier because they're not used to this. And bulldozing doesn't always work, and in fact it works very little in terms of family succession. So that can be an impediment. Not something that they really want to do, sometimes not even aware that they're doing it, but it does happen because they're used to that and the way they did their business. Another interesting issue is what we would call the money taboo. People talk about everything in the world, but when it comes to money, somehow or other they clamp up. And if you are looking below the surface to find out why this is, many people don't want to give the impression that they're money conscious, that they're money hungry, that they are greedy, that they're unappreciative. So they make believe that money really doesn't matter when in fact money does matter. And it's always helpful to put it out and say, look, you have money interests because you have issues of expenses and things of that nature. Best to put it on the table and say there's nothing wrong with it. It's only wrong if it gets to the point of being obsessive or that you want too much. But the taboo itself does play a role in terms of saying I don't want to talk about this or avoiding the topic, which can sometimes be very harmful. The third actually relates more to number one, namely that there is not what you would call full disclosure, especially from the one that is making the decision to prepare the next generation. And that full disclosure holdback is related to the idea of I am the boss, it's my decision, it'll be done my way. And the more information that you hold back, the more you have the power over the situation. The more the information is shared, the less control you do have. And there's some sort of a hesitancy to relinquish control. Again, you ask them, do you really want to relinquish control? They'll say yes. The conscious answer is an honest answer, but it doesn't take into account the unconscious forces that are going on in the individual. We'll get to that a little bit later towards the end. Another impediment is the avoidance of family issues. This has to do with the tensions that may already exist in the family. Ron pointed some of them out. Tensions between the siblings, tensions between the older generation and the younger generation, and these somehow or other come to the fore in the process of trying to come up with a nice equitable solution. And there's a certain reluctance to talk about this because it can be embarrassing and it also could be explosive. So it is a natural tendency of people to try to avoid those things that are either painful or potentially Mount Vesuvius in miniature. There's item number 5 is a secretive fiduciary culture. I mean, this is a little bit of an interesting one. It talks a little bit about the different languages that are spoken in the succession process. There's the language of love and concern between parents and children, and then there's, of course, the legalese. They're not necessarily always marriageable because one is a little bit more hard-nosed, necessarily so. The other one is softer, and one can get in the way of the other, and it's important, of course, to be conscious of this in proceeding forward. Finally, for this slide, you see lawyers and accountants' comfort zone is taxes and legal structures. This does not mean that lawyers or accountants are capable of going beyond the comfort zone, but the truth of the matter is that it's a natural tendency of us when we see a conflict arising between, and it's not on the legal stuff, which is where the expertise arises, we somehow or other recoil and say, no, I don't want to get involved in this because this could be a long, protracted mess, and it may be something that I'm not able to do. So somehow or other, the best approach, again, is to not touch it, but you can't avoid it because it constantly comes up and is a sword that gets in the way of making the types of decisions that need to be made for the good of all involved. Over back to you, Ron.
Okay, just before we leave that, just wanted to comment on item number 5, the secretive fiduciary culture. Of course, those are words that are music to the ears of the lawyers in the crowd. And one of the things that I found, we went to law school, we learned about trusts and how trusts can be used to maintain control and to disperse funds amongst the family members. If it's a discretionary trust, then that just adds to that sense of control. And while it made sense in law school, and it makes sense in business, and it makes sense in a lot of different ways, the part that was not so apparent, or that they didn't teach us in law school, was the negative impact that this holding on of control can have on family relations. So while a lot of lawyers like to use trusts, and it may even become somewhat reflexive in suggesting the use of a trust, it's very important for all of us to be mindful of some of the negative consequences that can arise when using the trust vehicle. Okay. So we'll move away from the negative into some of the positive. And we'd like to talk here about the hallmarks of successful succession plans. For anyone who studies the family business world, there are two items that seem to pop up all of the time when asking experts in the field what are the most important elements of a successful transition. And they are, one, that the next generation, it's important for the next generation to develop their own vision for the business. Think about it, the converse of this can be true as well, and usually is. If it's all about the vision of the previous generation, then that doesn't augur too well for a successful business going into the next generation. Terms like developing a passion, developing ownership in the business, not ownership in the legal sense, but the other kind of ownership. It's extremely important for that next generation to ask themselves the question, so what am I doing here? Why am I in this business? Besides the obvious, to make money, what is my purpose? What is both the purpose of the business and how that fits in with me and my siblings and whoever else is involved, the other key stakeholders in the business. So that's an important conversation to occur. The second area has to do with governance. And I think when most of us think about governance, we think about, especially in a business context, we think of board of directors. That would be the key governance element of the business. And we're all, I'm sure, familiar with boards of directors. But we need to be thinking not just of a governance structure for the business, but it's extremely important to be thinking about a governance structure for the family. And by that, obviously, if the family and the business are one and the same, let's think of the first generation, there's no issue there. It's only when you get into the second and subsequent generations that you need to be conscious of this. And so you can, of course, have family members who have a stake in the business, maybe as shareholders or as beneficiaries of a trust, but they aren't involved in the business itself. And this is why it is extremely important when one is looking to transition a business from one generation to the next, to be mindful of the importance of a governance structure for the family. And that can be as basic as ensuring that once a year the family gets together at the family cottage and has a discussion about the business at that time. It's usually done in an informal setting like that. The purpose of it is to inform at a very high level the family members about what's going on in the business. If people have opinions that they would like to share, that's always a good thing. It doesn't mean, by the way, that those opinions have to be carried forward, but it's extremely important to have the dialogue, to allow people, to give them a forum both for hearing what's going on and for expressing their views and their opinions. So this little cartoon in front of you, I think, illustrates some of these points very, very well. On the left-hand side, it's Goofus and Gallant in the family business. Goofus, the fellow on the left, is not doing the things that he should be doing, and Gallant on the right is doing all the things that he should be doing. So in the first case, he promotes himself for a seat on the board. That's usually not a good thing. You'd like to have people on the board who know about business, who can make valuable contributions to the discussions about the business, and it should be up to others to decide who are the most competent people to do that. He campaigns for higher dividends. Well, as any business person knows, you need to be, for a business to be successful, you have to think first about the business and then about those who own the business. And in this case, Goofus has it the other way around. He's concerned about himself and how much money he can take out of the business. Not an unusual situation, of course, but one that needs to be addressed in the proper way. He lets other employees know that he's one of the owners. Usually not a helpful statement to make. Doesn't take long for other employees in the business to understand if that's what he's all about. Then that's not the best thing for morale, of course. He pays no attention to the company's financial reports to stockholders, and he skips family meetings and ignores his relatives, and doing a very good job using his fishing rod over there. So all those things, of course, aren't helpful, and you can see on the other side of each of these what the proper behavior should be. There are many other things that we could talk about in terms of successful succession plans, but these ones would capture the high points. So, as advertised, the purpose of this was to talk about recent trends, and we have noticed really quite distinctly three trends in very recent times. I would say the calendar year 2014 in our business, these ones really jumped out at us. So the first one, business owners insisting on succession plan being put in place for the estate plan. This is something certainly that we have not seen in our business ever before. Clients of ours were asking, why should I spend the money on an estate plan when I don't know what my operating assumptions will be for the business? Are my children in or are they out? They're in, which are in, and the ones who say they want to be in, how do I know that they'll be prepared? So in that one case that I've just described, there have been years of accountants pushing to have, this is a very successful business, and of course as every year passes and value increases, when you do that estate freeze, it just means more and more taxes on death. So there was a tremendous amount of pressure being put on the client to proceed with this, and there was an equal amount of resistance on the client's part, saying, no, it does not make sense to me. I know you're trying to save me tax dollars, but it makes no sense at all for me to be doing this when I don't know the fundamentals. In another case that we had, people said, our eldest son is going to take over, but his younger brother is not reacting well to that, and we're worried about their relationship as brothers. This is what is keeping us awake at night. And so you can see from that example, again, it would be easy maybe in previous times. This is something, of course, that they would still be thinking about, but there was no avenue for them to do anything about it, so they just dealt with it and moved forward. It was an uncomfortable feeling, getting it done, but in both of these cases, what we did was we met individually with family members. They weren't necessarily, these are actually, these two examples that I'm giving are what I would call highly functional families, wonderful relationships, closeness all around, and really one of the major way of breaking the logjam in both situations was the fact that we were giving people an opportunity to talk to us, not necessarily talking to each other, because sometimes that didn't work so well, but just by being able to talk with us, that really opened the floodgates. Obviously, there's more to it than that, but that went a long way just to have that opportunity for a discussion. And once that was done, the elephant in the room disappeared, and it was incredible how easy it became to deal with these other issues which had been seemingly intractable for so long. So, on to the second bullet.
Second bullet is succession plans gone wrong, getting fixed while parents still alive. There's a lot of interesting dynamics that are going on that are becoming more and more clear as we get into and wading into the family issues involved in succession. The older generation is interested not only in, obviously, continuing to succeed, but also is interested in a legacy. And they don't want to leave this world, if it's in their power, without somehow or other feeling good that the next generation is going to nurture their business as well as they did. Sometimes that's almost like an impossible demand, but they see this as their contribution to making the world a better place, and they just don't want it to evaporate. There is an interesting dynamic that is at work here, which is that the parent generation that did that well, very often the leader of the business did so at the expense of the family. So what happens is, yes, they did exceedingly well, but their relationship with their children is, I wouldn't necessarily say at loggerheads, but it's not a warm and fuzzy one because they hardly know them. And somehow or other, at this point in time, the succession plan takes on a different coloration for the older generation, which is, how am I going to mend this relationship? Or hopefully I'm going to buy my way into the good graces of my children by giving them this big prize. Unfortunately, the younger generation doesn't necessarily have the same connection to the business. They don't see it in the same way as the older generation does, and it may also be tinged with a little bit of resentment. Yes, this is the business that got between me and my father, mother, whatever the case may be. On the other hand, with the parent generation, they're looking at it and saying, we're giving this great gift to our children. What did you do for that? We worked hard, and you're doing nothing. You're getting a freebie. So there's an issue of challenging the deservedness. So one of the things that I try to do is to invoke the golden rule, which is to say to the older generation, put yourself in the position of the younger generation. It's always good to visualize the other side, no matter what conflict that we are involved in, and say, look at it from their point of view. What do you think they want? Firstly, they would want it to be orderly. They wouldn't want it to be imposed upon them. They wouldn't want it to be something where it's being rubbed in their faces that they didn't do anything for it. They want this to be a pleasant experience where they really feel that you, the parents, want this for them, not for your sake, but for their sake. But that you're not imposing upon them, you're just proposing. Those are easily said things, but they need to be out there in the open. The older generation needs to actually appreciate that, in fact, there's a major wholesale change going on here. They may not be prepared for it. And there's another elephant in the room that we might as well bring up, which is that the older generation realizes that this is somehow or other, it's not a death sentence, but it's a way of their finally realizing that they're not forever. It's not an easy pill to swallow. But once we know that this is a pill that they're having difficulty swallowing, it's easier to handle, to bring it out into the open, let them know, everyone with their easy answers to this, but the intellectual part of it is not the difficulty, it's the emotional part of it. And the other major issue is the question of appreciation. The older generation looks upon this and saying, I am giving a massive gift to my kids, and they may not say so, but they would like to hear a nice thank you. We are stunned at the amount, the number of situations when we see the reasons for the gratitude, but the word thank you does not come out of the mouths of the children. Not only does not come out, but in some of the questions and some of the counter suggestions that they are making, it seems almost like an absence of it. So infusing the sense of gratitude in the younger generation is one of the very important things in making sure this thing not only goes successfully but also smoothly. Because you wouldn't want to have a legal settlement that is great but leaves so many scars on the battlefield in the process.
The third trend is the evolving role of lawyers and accountants, and you will perhaps not be surprised. I'm sure you're all seeing this in your own practice, how things have changed dramatically in so many ways over the last number of years. And in this case specifically, again, it's where I'll call it the traditional estate planning lawyer is accustomed to giving advice within their comfort zone, as you've heard a few times already today. And it's going from that to, I would describe it as going from a narrow focus to somewhat of a wider focus. It doesn't have to be wide open. It just, even just by opening things up slightly, by perhaps asking the extra question about what's going on, and whereas in the past perhaps once you heard about family problems, you realize, okay, well, that's not my area of expertise, so I'm going to stay away from that. And it's amazing sometimes by asking open-ended questions of your clients, listening carefully to their answers, you're doing a number of things there. You're showing how much you care, which of course can never be a bad thing as a professional. And your empathy comes out and is taken that. You may not realize when you're asking that question, but your client is feeling your sympathy, and that in itself can open up discussions. Now, this is all not to suggest that we're turning tax lawyers into family counselors. It's nothing of the sort. It is a recognition of these issues. You are showing the client that you understand that their problems are not just about saving taxes. And so we're seeing that. And of course the clients must be seeing that, because if they are now asking to have their succession plans done before their estate plans, that's got to tell us a lot, that we are doing something, that we are evolving, because that didn't happen 20 years ago. But it is starting to happen today. We are certainly seeing it, and others are seeing it as well. So one of the things that, there's a book, if you want to, and we can, Crystal, you can send this out. I can give you the details. But a New York lawyer, a gentleman by the name of James Hughes, has written a few tremendous books on this. The one that I have in front of me is called Family, the Compact Among Generations. And he's got a section here about it's chapter 20, the person de confiance. And for those who don't understand French, it means a person of confidence. And this is who you repose trust and confidence in. And this will get everyone's attention. The first subheading in that chapter is Today's Legal Profession, a Failure to Serve. So a pretty challenging statement. And I think by reading this, you see how important it is to transition from a technical expert to someone who is more of the trusted advisor, a term that we're all very familiar with. So, with that concludes our presentation. Certainly, if anyone has any questions, now would be the time to type them in. And I see that we have one already. So it reads as follows: I don't like going outside my comfort zone. How do you suggest I transition from a tax advisor to dealing with my clients' family issues?
Well, that's an interesting question. Probably the best bet is to get someone in who has that expertise that you work with together, because becoming conversant in those issues is not an easy thing, and it's going to take a lot of time away from the things that you do well. So you're best off partnering with someone whose services you offer in the procedure, so that you don't have to worry about that. You work together with them, and they handle that component of the issue, and you work together well with them, so that you come up with a successful end game because of that. The easiest way. Just use the expertise that is around you, rather than trying to become that expert yourself and compromising yourself.
And in terms of finding that expertise in whatever jurisdiction you happen to be in, if you already know people, that's one thing. If you don't, family business consultants seem to be in all jurisdictions now, so you could ask around for who the best is in your particular jurisdiction. We offer our services as well. We have to put in a plug for ourselves, right? So certainly if you're stuck or you would like to, we're all part of the Meritas family, so we're here to help. And if you would like to call upon us, again, Crystal will be sending our contact information out to everyone, and we would be more than happy to help you on a formal, informal, or any other basis that would help move you along to become a personne de confiance.
Thank you, Ron and Dr. Bulka. That was a great job. It was really a pleasure to have you on today. I don't see any further questions, so I think unless you had anything further to add, we probably would conclude this webinar.
Oh, we're done.
All right, perfect. So just before we sign off, I just wanted to remind each of you that in the next few days I will distribute a copy of the presentation, a recording of the webinar, as well as Ron and Dr. Bulka's contact details, and the book that he mentioned earlier in the presentation. Please do not hesitate to reach out to either of them directly if you have any further questions. With that, thank you for taking the time to join us, and I hope everyone has a great day. Bye.
Thank you.